The worst moment was when she turned off her camera and in front of our biggest client closed the call with, "You are not leadership material." I had just warned her about a risk tied to a $12,000 bonus on Project Aurora, and instead of thanking me, she said that line like it was a verdict. There was a long silence. The client muted their microphone. My face went hot. I smiled, closed my laptop gently, and wrote the calmest follow-up email I could think of. I worked at Marlin MediaWorks as Senior Project Manager in Content Operations. My job was to run high-stakes video launches for clients who depended on us to hit views, engagement, and measurable conversions. Project Aurora was the biggest thing on my desk that year. Brightline Apparel was paying us $340,000 to launch a capsule collection campaign with a $12,000 bonus tied to a post-launch sales spike. The bonus was supposed to motivate the media team and vendors to hit a 75% increase in conversion in the first week. My department head was Dana. She ran client relations and had been at Marlin for 8 years. Dana was magnetic in person. She could charm a procurement director into changing payment terms, but she had a habit of shortcutting process when she thought speed would look like leadership. That shortcutting cost our studio more than image. She liked to present bold moves in meetings, then make decisions in private and expect everyone else to catch up. Her flaw was entitlement masked as initiative. The line about my leadership came on March 18, 2024. We were on a video call with Brightline Apparel's marketing director, Maria Hayes, and 3 of their procurement team. I had flagged a risk in the week before the launch on a Thursday email with subject line Aurora Bonus Risk Escalation. In that email, I wrote the test results from our pre-launch analytics, the deviation in the creative cut, and the fact that our vendor for checkout tracking had not completed a server-side tag deployment. I recommended we hold the bonus pending verification. Dana replied in the thread, "We are green to go." She called me into the call and interrupted me when I tried to explain the tag issue. After the client asked a quiet question, Dana shut it down and said, "You are not leadership material." I steadied myself. I took a breath. I did not raise my voice. I typed the follow-up email as soon as the call ended. The email had a timestamp and 3 attachments. The tag deployment log named Tag Log Aurora 2024-03-15, PDF, a screen grab of the analytics test results named Analytics Test Aurora 2024-03-14, PNG, and the vendor ticket ID 4821 in the subject line for their internal system. I copied the client, the vendor account manager, and my direct supervisor on that email. I wrote, "I am escalating this because of the unresolved tag deployment. I recommend holding the $12,000 bonus until we confirm server-side tracking is live." No drama, no personal attacks. Dana replied to everyone with one sentence, "Proceed as planned." She did not address the attachments. She did not explain why she had overridden the technical recommendation. The bonus went out after the launch. 2 days later, the sales spike the client expected did not show up in their dashboard. Brightline's procurement called to say the bonus could not be verified because the conversion tracking was incomplete. The $12,000 was frozen while they investigated. That was the first crack. Over the next 9 months, things started to pile up. It did not happen all at once. It was a slow leak that turned into a flood. Dana made a string of decisions that bypassed standard review steps. Each step added to the pattern. The studio had an internal content compliance matrix with 112 items we tested on every major launch. By the end of 9 months, 18 separate items in that matrix had been flagged as non-compliant across our projects. Each one could be traced back to a decision Dana made or a revised approval she sent after the fact. The first escalation was reputational. In May, we had another launch project title for Solace Skincare. Dana insisted we approve a last-minute creative change at 5 p.m. on a Friday. The new creative had a text overlay that messed up accessibility contrast rules. The accessibility team had no time to sign off. 2 days after launch, an accessibility advocacy group flagged the ad publicly. The client released a social media apology. I had written a note in the change log that said change request, overlay color, not signed off 2024-05-10-17-03. I had also added my objection in the producer chat. Dana edited the change log later that night and marked it as approved with the initials DG. The client blamed us. Dana blamed me. She leaned into the story that procedure had failed under my watch. The second escalation was opportunity. In July, I was up for a promotion to Director of Client Operations. I had led 3 successful launches that quarter with documented key performance indicator improvements: average watch time up 22%, click-through rate up 14%, and conversion on tracked campaigns up 38%. When promotion decisions were being discussed, Dana quietly reassigned one of my flagship accounts to her direct report and started presenting the wins in leadership meetings as her team's wins. I stayed quiet in those meetings. I showed the exported performance metrics dashboard file, named Aurora and title KPI 2024 Q2, XLSX, in my one-on-one with my supervisor and said, "These are the performance exports with timestamps and client attestations." He nodded and asked me to keep documenting. The promotion process passed me over. Dana's direct report got the title and the salary bump. The third escalation was trust and allies. People started to believe the easiest story. In September, during a cross-department review, an executive asked about a recurring billing error that had been costing us $1,200 a month on a distribution vendor. I had flagged that vendor invoice mismatch in an internal ticket in April. The ticket was assigned to Dana's team and then closed with the note, "Vendor adjusted." I pulled the invoice history, the vendor contract, and the closed ticket. The audit showed no adjustment. When I asked Dana for proof in an email, she responded with a 3-line note, "We handled it. Move on." A week later, the error showed up on our expense report, and the payroll team asked why the cost center had not been adjusted. I forwarded the unedited ticket and the invoice history to payroll. Dana accused me of not escalating sooner. A trusted colleague who had been mentoring me stopped taking my calls for a month. I remember the quiet like a physical pressure. I would go home and count the items in my notebook like beads. By December, the pile had 18 rule breaches. I started cataloging them in a spreadsheet I called Aurora Audit Packet Rule Index 2024. It had a tab for each breach, dates, decision points, affected deliverables, dollar amounts, and the specific item number from our content compliance matrix. For each entry, I attached evidence: emails, calendar invites, screen grabs, ticket exports, vendor receipts, and the monthly performance metrics dashboard exports. I timestamped everything. I exported the chat history from our project channel and saved it as Project Aurora Chat 2024-03-01 to 2024-12-01 TXT. I printed physical copies and put them in a binder labeled Aurora File Timeline 2024. I did not wave this binder around. I did not tell anyone I was building it. I also had 2 unexpected things happen. First, our vendor account manager, Lucas, dropped a copy of an invoice approval he had mistakenly attached to an internal note instead of the vendor ticket. He came by my desk and slid the printout across and said, "You should have this." He was nervous. He did not want drama. That invoice showed a misallocated payment of $15,000 that had been split into the marketing budget and a discretionary fund Dana controlled. Second, one of Dana's junior coordinators, Priya, who had been quietly checking boxes for her entire career, came to me after a meeting and said, "I am tired of cleaning up." She handed me 4 emails where Dana had approved decisions and then asked everyone to retro-sign approvals after the fact. Priya asked me to keep the emails safe because she did not want to get boxed in. Those 2 things were not glamorous, but they were real. The low point came in late January. I was called to a meeting in conference room 7B with human resources and my supervisor. There was a performance improvement plan folder on the table with my name on it. The plan cited missed deadlines and an episode of poor escalation. They had cherry-picked one messy launch that had been handed a final creative cut the night before release and blamed me for not catching it. In the meeting, human resources read the plan out loud. I could feel my chest tight. I had, quite frankly, believed at that moment that the system had worked against me. I walked out of that room and went to my desk. I breathed slowly. I opened my drawer and pulled the Aurora file binder. I sat down, spread the documents, checked the index, and made an expanded copy of the rule index with cross-references to the policy manual. I brought that copy home. I did not post on social media. I did not gossip. I focused on the facts. I stayed calm in public. There were at least 2 moments where I could have exploded. The night before I was supposed to present a weekly update to the studio leadership team, Dana stopped me in the hallway and said, "You need to stop complaining about the Brightline thing. It is done." I smiled, took a breath, and said nothing. The leadership presentation the next day went fine. I used screenshots and numbers. I let the dashboard speak. In another meeting, when a junior staffer accused me of being difficult, I walked out of the room after one sentence and sent a follow-up message with a project timeline and the names of people who had approved various steps. I did not call names. I just laid out the chain of custody for decisions. People slowed down when presented with paperwork. The turning point came in February. Brightline Apparel escalated to our chief executive officer and asked for a formal review. They wanted answers about the $12,000 bonus and the lack of verified conversion. They scheduled a client video call that included Brightline Apparel's head of procurement, our chief executive officer, 2 members of the finance team, Dana and me. I prepared a packet for that meeting. The packet was heavy. It had the Aurora Audit Packet Binder converted into a 300-page PDF named Aurora Audit Packet 2024-02-14 PDF. It had an appendix with the tag log Aurora 2024-03-15 PDF, the vendor ticket export 4821, the invoice showing the $15,000 misallocation, the monthly performance dashboard exports for March to December, and the email thread where Dana wrote, "Proceed as planned." I labeled each document with where it belonged in the timeline. On the call, the tone was tight. Brightline's procurement director, Maria, asked, "We were told tracking was live. Why do we not see the conversions?" I waited. Dana started to speak and then paused. There was a long beat. I clicked share screen and opened Aurora Audit Packet 2024-02-14 PDF. I showed the timeline. I started at March 14th with the analytics test result. I moved to the March 15th tag log showing the server-side tag incomplete. I then opened the vendor ticket export and highlighted that the ticket was unresolved when Dana had written "Proceed as planned." I clicked to the email where Dana said, "Proceed as planned." The chief executive officer leaned forward on his camera. I felt my hands steady. I told him, I escalated this. I attached the test results and the ticket in the follow-up email following the call. I clicked to show the follow-up email with the timestamp March 18th, 2024 at 16:02. The email chain was visible to everyone on the call. I went through the 18 rule breaches in the rule index. For each breach, I showed the document that proved who had the approval authority and the timestamp of the sign-off. I showed the vendor invoice that Lucas had slid across my desk. I showed the emails Priya had given me. I did not raise my voice. I let the document sit on the screen. Dana's face went white. She tried to pivot. She said, "This is a complicated timeline. We handled a lot." She said it as if complexity absolved culpability. I clicked to the meeting notes from a recorded internal decision meeting where she had summarized action items and signed them, and the line read, "Approve bonus release for Aurora Dana." I scrolled to the attachment. There it was. The chief executive officer put a hand to his chin. Maria from Brightline had a copy of the call log and asked a pointed question about the tracking vendor. She said, "Why was the bonus released if the vendor ticket shows tracking incomplete?" There was no spinning possible. At that point, Dana did something I did not expect. She looked at the screen, looked at the chief executive officer, and said, "You are right. I approved the release. I own it." She said it in a small voice. She had to admit it to everyone on a call that included the client, the chief executive officer, the finance director, and 3 members of human resources. The admission was not theatrical. It was a slow deflation. That public truth moment was the payoff. All the dots connected. The finance team opened a procurement review. Brightline's procurement asked for formal remediation and a refund of the $12,000 pending verification. Human Resources opened an internal audit into the 18 rule breaches and the procedure bypasses. The vendor contract was reviewed. Dana was placed on administrative leave while an investigation proceeded. She had to answer formal questions about why she had signed off authority overrides and where the $15,000 had been allocated. The junior coordinator, Priya, and the vendor manager, Lucas, were allowed to give statements. Their statements matched the documents in the Aurora Audit Packet. My revenge was not dramatic. I did not gloat. I did not publicly smear her. I refused to rescue her when she asked me to sign a short note that minimized the breaches. She sent me a private message saying, "Can you just sign this? It will make this go away." I opened the message, read the text, and replied, "I cannot attest to things that did not occur. I will cooperate with the audit." I did not cover. I did not lie for her. I let the documented truth do the heavy lifting. What happened afterwards was measured. Dana was not fired that day. The studio put her on a corrective action plan, assigned an external compliance officer to review her approvals, and instructed her to return only after retraining and a formal statement of accountability. The finance team reclaimed the $15,000 and reallocated it to the correct cost centers. Brightline received a partial refund and a remediation plan that included a free follow-up launch coached directly by me. In the end, Brightline renewed with us for a smaller pilot in which I led the operations directly under oversight. The finance numbers improved. The studio's leadership admitted in a follow-up town hall that procedural bypasses had created risk, and that leadership needed to change approval flows. Within 6 weeks, I started getting offers from other studios who had been watching. One offer stood out. Polaris Creative Studio contacted me and offered a role as Director of Client Success with a clear mandate over process and compliance, and a salary increase to $125,000 a year plus a performance bonus tied to verified metrics. I chose to accept. It was a chance to build a culture I had tried to create where approvals were not a suggestion and where the compliance team had teeth. I handed my notice in the week before the finance audit report was finalized. I told him I will help with the transition and finalize the Aurora remediation plan. I stayed professional. I closed the loop. I trained my replacement and handed over the Aurora audit packet and every supporting file. Dana stayed at Marlin for a few months while the audit ran. The public admission had damaged her reputation. Colleagues were quieter with her. She stopped making unilateral decisions publicly. The whole thing changed how leadership handled approval authority. Human Resources rewrote parts of the content compliance process and added mandatory sign-offs for any discretionary funds above $5,000. The studio also started publishing monthly compliance summaries to leadership so patterns could not hide. I learned a few things that were quieter than the headlines. First, documentation is not just filing. It is your voice when everything else is noisy. Second, staying calm does not mean being weak. It means making sure your next move is the right move. Third, sometimes the cleanest revenge is to refuse to be the rescue that lets bad behavior continue. I left Marlin with the Aurora binder scanned into my portfolio and with friends who apologized. I also left with a clearer idea about the kind of leadership I wanted to be.